Good afternoon. Welcome. I was inspired by the title of today's chapter, The Perfect Storm, from a movie made in 2000. A true story about a fishing boat that left Massachusetts, headed off the coast of Newfoundland in Canada, and went well past their normal fishing grounds in an attempt to get fish, get a catch. They were on the brink of bankruptcy, repossession of their fishing boat. Captain and crew had little choice except to go at the end of the season and go on a last-ditch fishing expedition. And it was the confluence of disparate events, not a huge storm, not one storm, two storms, coupled with a hurricane, created what nautical seafaring people called the perfect storm. The conditions were just right. They were successful in getting a huge catch of fish, but their contribution to the perfect storm was that number one, they threw caution aside and went late season when storms were known to ravage that coast, to ravage that part of the Atlantic. And the second thing that happened to them was that their ice machines broke. They couldn't keep the catch fresh. So even though they knew there was a storm, their weather equipment showed a huge storm. They elected to make their way through the middle of it in the hopes that they could get some of the fish back before they were spoiled. Well, as far as perfect storms go, this was a perfect one. Perfect in the sense that every element of nature was firing on all cylinders, but hardly the best case scenario for the captain and crew. While a rogue wave, at least 100 feet, came, and if you could only imagine the terror of being in a storm, and capsized the boat, and only the rookie crewman on board was to survive to tell the story. And the reason I repeat this story is because what's perfect for nature isn't always perfect for man. And within this story, I realized that my own awakening from progressive awareness to permanent awareness was indeed a perfect storm. All the elements, most of them certainly out of my control, came together at the precise same moment. This was an overwhelming experience that lasted 2 or 3 days. And as far as I know, as far as I can recall, as far as I'm aware of, because this experience was otherworldly and I had nothing, no previous experience with which to compare it. But I'd already begun my habit of sitting in a chair for meditation. I'm looking at that exact chair. It didn't happen where I'm sitting, but the chairs, the 2 chairs that I use for my meditation, way back when 5 years ago, just about this time of the year, when I was living in Geelong, the chair has managed to make the move with me, and it's now has a place of honor in my meditation room. And I always had prepared 2 chairs. One I would consistently sit in, and the other chair was for my soulmate, whoever she might be. At that time, I had no idea who she was. I had no idea that I would even find one, much less who she was. But I honored her eventual presence without knowing or even expecting that there would be someone to fill that chair. My perfect storm, the meshing, the universe, my 2 storms and the hurricane meeting at the same place, led to a 2 or 3 day experience sitting in that chair. If I did get up to get a drink of water or to go to the facilities, I certainly have no recollection. As far as I know, these 2 and a portion of the 3rd day was remarkable, but it wasn't measurable. It was only afterwards that I pieced it together. It was only afterwards that I understood, because my relationship with time was completely skewed. And not as dramatically as the story related with the severest consequences. Mine was not without its own drama. A series of things happen, sequential as best I can recall. The first was being exposed to all the accumulated knowledge and wisdom from past, present, and future, with an onslaught of information just coming. I mentioned before, it's like the books, I pictured it as like the books in a library with shelves to the ceiling. And that museum, that library was Alexandria in Egypt. And the bookshelves would just fall with hundreds of books and just fall to me. And be replaced by another and another and another and another. And two things came from this experience. The first was totally unexpected. Did I even have the facilities to absorb this information? And the next part of it was a definite yes, that access to it might not always be at my beck and call, at my desire. What I came to understand was that when I needed it, it would be available. Until such time, it might as well have been inaccessible. So I learned to say, I know what I need to know when I need to know it. And that's not with any cockiness. That's out of all humbleness, trust me. Then I had an experience of past lives, and that was such a nice change from the intensity of just no way of guessing how long. Well, how long does it take to be exposed to everything that has been, is, and will be known? You tell me. And then we can so maybe you could help me bend time to fit my experience. Because as I said, time as I know it, linear time, was no consequence, no meaning. And the next was an introduction to past lives. And not the kind of past life thing that you might hear somebody brag of, they were this and that, everybody was this and that. But trust me, somebody had to be the village idiot. Somebody had to be the farmer. Somebody had to be the shepherd. In the more sophisticated societies, we need garbage men. And we need everybody to keep this structure going. So I didn't have any grandiose epiphanies that I was king of blah, blah, blah. So again, ordinariness, the commonality, the ordinariness. And the way this was presented to me was a very good break from the intensity of the knowledge, absorbing the knowledge, being exposed to knowledge and wisdom. And I was floating down a tube, an inner tube, on a meandering river. And the past lives, although I wasn't moving quickly, I was moving consistently, so that any one scene was not much more than a glimpse. And going down this river for what seemed, and glimpsing to right and left of previous existences. There's very little as I remember to tell the time again, because time continued to be of so little import. After all, time as we know it is an artificial construct. We came up with that because we like to measure things. And it gave us some sense of beginning, middle, and end. So probably without the concept of time, we probably wouldn't have been anywhere near as civilized as we are. although I'm reading a post-apocalyptic book, which I really enjoy. I found myself drawn to this genre of science fiction. And what they stress and what I see is so obvious is how quickly our society collapses back to the primitive days. Only takes weeks at most before people revert. So that veneer, that civilization is a very, very, very fragile and thin veneer. And I don't really understand my attraction. This is relatively new attraction in the last couple of years to this post-apocalyptic scenarios and stories. The preppers, the people who prepare for these catastrophes. And interesting enough, I feel in many ways that I've been preparing for apocalypse, preparing for these catastrophes, not physically by hoarding, building a shelter and hoarding food, but preparing emotionally, mentally, and physically, that in such conditions I aim to be a source of comfort for those of you that can adjust to. I feel like I've been preparing basically my whole life for survival in some kind of catastrophe, perhaps another perfect storm. But as I've seen the lifetimes pass by at my leisure, I remember, maybe I was thirsty because I remember sipping water. I remember having a water bottle on my inner tube, and I remember sipping water. So I might have been thirsty because I can't recall having any nourishment, any water during this 2+ days perfect storm. And next came to me the resolution of duality, where I started repeating opposites: tall, short, fat, thin, old, young, white, black, male, female, angry, loving. All the opposites just came flying at me. And I remember the one that stuck with me was about the thing that I spent a lot of time thinking about myself is there's arguments for destiny, and there's arguments for free will, and both proponents of each side left little room to compromise. It was either this or that. And it started out by me taking a look at preordained, and I'd shake my head, yes, indeed. Life is preordained. It's really not in our control. And right after that, I'd be thinking about free will. And I was equally adamant, equally sure that free will was ours. We had control. Just the opposite of destiny. And then what happened? Free will? Certainly, sure. Destiny? Fate? Preordained? Certainly, sure. And then came the insight, the inspiration that both were equally so. And wrestling with that, grasping that, I've been shown, is the last piece of the puzzle before you return to that which you've always been. When you realize the senselessness, the fantasy of ego, the fantasy of you having any control whatsoever around the world in which you find yourself, all the structure, all come crumbling down. The perfect storm was necessary to create this opportunity. And I flash back on my koan that I was given by the Roshi 30 years ago that I've been trying to solve intellectually as a puzzle, and eventually, and really deluded, thinking that if I solved this puzzle, then I would be awake. All I had to do is solve this puzzle. Well, like other things, clarity, silencing my mind, like other things, this remained an obstacle, that an undoable. I couldn't do it. And for how long I looked at it as a failure. I didn't sit hard enough. I wasn't dedicated enough. I wasn't a good enough samurai, as my tradition of Rinzai Zen required me to be. I didn't sweat enough in my meditations as required by my discipline. I lacked discipline, basically. And I saw it as a shortcoming. Well, here, through inspiration, I learned that the point, perhaps the point, I'm still not sure what the point was, but maybe the point of these koans is to just exhaust the mind and give up, just like Buddha did. He tried everything, and it wasn't until he gave up that his awakening happened, his enlightenment in the light through giving up. So 30 years of wrestling with these things and basically thinking that something was lacking in my diligence and effort. I wasn't trying hard enough. And in this brief, well, it felt like a brief moment, but who knows again, the linear time frame. I was gifted. I was given this reconciliation of diametrically opposed opposites, right and wrong. To be able to say, to look to the left and say, hey, destiny? Sure. Free will? Certainly. And not have my brain explode. And it was then I knew that, reconcile duality, because there is no duality. It's just measurement. Just measurement. Agree. 180 degrees opposite, but on the same continuum. Equally so. And I felt, I was told at this time, that this reconciliation of dualities, of seeing the Maya, being inspired to see, being gifted to see the Maya of duality. It's one thing to say everything is one. It's really quite another to experience it. From this experience, right after this, just it's the cosmic joke. I laughed my butt off. I laughed so hard. I cried. Tears. I laughed so hard that tears came out. But it wasn't long that the tears turned to real tears. And I was lamenting all the time and lives that I'd spent in ignorance. So at one moment I'm celebrating, next moment I'm weeping to the point of wailing, moaning, noises were coming out. And the same amount I laughed in the beginning, I laughed so long that it hurt. That my face hurt, my body hurt, my stomach hurt, my lungs hurt. I laughed so much and so... I wonder what my neighbors... I have relatively thin walls in the living room, and I wonder what my neighbors thought, what was going on. And then with the same intensity was the wailing, the weeping, the crying. Intense. And I felt like I was crying for all those that had come before me and all those that will come after me that haven't gotten to the point I was at right then. They all will. Rest assured, I'm certain of that. We all will. And our painting of this experience by the very nature of our individuality, our uniqueness, will be very dissimilar, I can only guess, to what I went through. Only sharing. And I stumbled on the I. Not I, the individual. I, the group. I, the everything. And at this point, after laughing and then equal amount of time, I guess, crying, then I found myself laughing and crying at the same time. And it was as if somehow that I'm reconciling the duality again of laughter and tears, happiness and sadness, because I went through the very ecstatic happiness and into the deepest bowels of hell, despair, the blackest, bleakest, from the whitest, brightest, and then to experience at the same time. Have you ever laughed and cried at the same time with equal intensity? And again, I felt this was the completion of this reconciliation of the illusion, the Maya of duality. And with the cleansing, with the completion of doing them both together, helped me to begin to understand that I couldn't go back to living in a world, a dualistic world. I had pierced the veil. And I think it's really ironic that the act of reconciling duality, in the act of reconciling duality, you get to see that why it's so. The joy and the laughter, the sadness and the tears, the hope, the despair, were again experienced in an equal amount of, as far as I know, an equal amount of time of occurring together, as if I needed a further demonstration. If my first reaction to laughing at the cosmic joke wasn't enough. So this is my perfect storm. I find myself sitting here and really sending everyone the opportunity to have their own perfect storm. When everything comes together in the moment. as in the story that I related in the beginning, 2 storms and a hurricane. Well, maybe for you it'll be 2 earthquakes and a volcanic eruption, which is happening to my friends in Puna on the Big Island, Hawaii, in the Hawaiian chain, the Hawaiian island chain. And happened to me indeed here in Hualien. Although we didn't have any lava, no erupting volcanoes, we had a series of strong earthquakes and aftershock that lasted for days. My friend right now is experiencing that on the Big Island, the island of Hawaii. And what I'm thinking, he's telling me that he's reacting to this on a body level and not a mental or emotional level. It's affecting him personally. And I'm guessing that this indeed could be his perfect storm. So if someone tells you that when someone asks you that, how do they know about this well, that word just eludes me. A calamity of the perfect storm. Who's to say if you're having one? But I will leave you with this. There's absolutely no chance of missing it. The culmination of events, of forces coming together at a specific time. And this was important. Again, not time in the linear sense, space-time in the quantum physics sense. And the time, your time, is already there. Your chore is to await it.